المرشحين لرئاسة المجلس البلدي لمدينة بيروت.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Samin, and these are today's top stories. Speaking in New York, Prime Minister Tamam Salam appeals to the international community to help Lebanon deal with the burden of Syrian refugees plaguing the country. The UN Special Envoy for Syria estimates that 400,000 people have been killed in Syria's civil war and urges major and regional powers to help salvage a crumbling ceasefire. And an Egyptian court adjourns a verdict in the trial of former President Mohamed Morsi until May 7th. Prime Minister Tamam Salam appeals to the international community to help Lebanon deal with the burden of Syrian refugees plaguing the country. The Prime Minister was speaking at the signature ceremony for the Paris Agreement on climate change at the UN headquarters in New York City. He pledged his country's commitment to joining the international efforts to end poverty, improve education and public health, and develop infrastructures and resources. Foreign Affairs Minister Gebran Bassil has lamented corruption at state institutions as he toured the northern city of Tripoli and met with prominent officials just weeks ahead of a municipal battle in the area. Bassil began his visit by meeting with former Prime Minister Najib Mikati and touring the Rashid Karami Tripoli International Fair. He also met with Social Affairs Minister Rashid Derbas, North Lebanon Governor Ramzi Nohra, MP Mohammad Safadi, and Greek Catholic Melkite Bishop of Tripoli Edward Dahir. In a statement he made at Al Jinan University in Tripoli, Bassil said corruption is eroding the state structure, and those corrupt are from various areas and sects. The foreign minister warned that peace in Lebanon was at risk due to the Israeli threat that Christians and Muslims cannot survive, and reiterated the FPM's support to the resistance against Israel in that context. He cited terrorism as another threat hampering Lebanon's stability. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk says Lebanon will hold timely municipal elections, adding that his ministry was fully prepared to supervise the polls. In remarks to Al-Akhbar newspaper, Mashnouk said there are no serious administrative or security obstacles that hinder the staging of elections. These polls, which take place every 6 years, are for mayors and mukhtars, which are local government officials in towns and villages. Mashnouk expressed belief that only the parliament, if it convened, could postpone the vote. He said local political powers will not manipulate the country's security to avoid a confrontation with regional powers, speculating that the international community also rejects the postponement of the municipal elections. At least 27 civilians were killed in government bombardment on rebel-held areas across Syria in the latest deadly violence despite a ceasefire deal. 12 civilians were killed in Aleppo, according to a local civil defense official, and the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said 13 others died in shelling on the rebel town of Douma, east of Damascus. 2 men were also killed in government airstrikes on Talbise in Homs province. But the deadliest raid was on the Tari el-Bab neighborhood on the eastern edges of the city. A civil defense member responding to the incident said 12 civilians had been killed there. At least 9 other civilians were wounded in airstrikes on other parts of the city, including Bustan al-Asr and al-Mashhad. It was the second day of daily strikes on Aleppo after 25 civilians were killed and another 40 wounded in airstrikes on Friday. The UN Special Envoy for Syria has estimated that 400,000 people have been killed throughout the last 5 years of civil war, urging major and regional powers to help salvage a crumbling ceasefire. Explaining that the death toll was based on his own estimate, Staffan de Mistura said it was not an official UN statistic. The UN no longer keeps track of the death toll due to the inaccessibility of many areas and the complications of navigating conflicting statistics put forward by the Syrian government and armed opposition groups. De Mistura also appealed to all involved parties to help revamp negotiations between the government of President Bashar al-Assad and opposition groups. 175 states signed the Paris climate deal at the UN headquarters in New York City. That's coming up next. Stay with us. Welcome back. Yemen's warring parties have held a new session of peace talks in Kuwait under pressure to firm up a fragile ceasefire that went into effect on April 11th. UN envoy Ismail Ould-Sheikh Ahmed told a press conference on Friday that the delegations had constructive negotiations and were committed to firming up the ceasefire. He acknowledged that the truce was still only between 70% and 80% respected and said there were violations by both sides. Rebel delegation spokesman Muhammad Abdussalam said the priority was to end the fighting that has killed more than 6,800 people and driven 2.8 million people from their homes since March last year. An Egyptian court has adjourned a verdict in the trial of former President Mohamed Morsi until May the 7th. Morsi and 10 other defendants, some of whom belong to the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood, are on trial for leaking state secrets and sensitive documents to Qatar. 4 of the defendants are being tried in absentia. The remaining defendants appeared in the courtroom expecting a verdict, but the presiding judge, Mohamed Fahmy, postponed the case, saying the court needed more time to reach the decision. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the United States is not opposed to foreign banks doing business with Iran, in line with the terms of a historic nuclear deal between Tehran and world powers. Kerry and Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif spoke to reporters before meeting together in New York.
The United States is not standing in the way and will not stand in the way of business that is permitted with Iran since the JCPOA took effect. And I want to emphasize, we lifted our nuclear-related sanctions as we committed to do, and there are now opportunities for foreign banks to do business with Iran. Unfortunately, there seems to be some confusion among some foreign banks, and we want to try to clarify that as much as we can.
We hope that the statement made today by Secretary Kerry will begin to open the difficult path that has been closed because of concerns that banks had about the U.S. approach towards implementation of the commitments on the JCPOA. We will continue to have differences with the United States. Our differences are very serious in a good number of areas. But we have decided together with P5+1 to address this issue, and we want to show that P5+1 and Iran have been able to resolve a very serious, difficult issue through negotiations, and I believe we should take the necessary steps in that regard. And I hope that through serious action, so that the Iranian people can see the benefits of implementation of JCPOA, we can move forward with the long-term implication for this very important agreement, which should create the foundations and not the ceilings for resolution of international issues.
The Foreign Minister is correct. There are differences, and some of them are obviously serious differences. Those have to be the subject of future discussion, but it's important for people to understand that an agreement is an agreement, and we need to separate, even as we are working to resolve those other differences. And nothing that I said diminishes the United States' commitment to helping to resolve those differences, and certainly to continue to work for the peace and stability of the region.
U.S. President Barack Obama is pressuring Britons to stay in the EU, warning they will be at the back of the queue for a U.S. trade deal if they left. Obama's intervention ahead of a June referendum on membership of the European Union was welcomed by UK Prime Minister David Cameron and other supporters of the EU. However, it was denounced by those campaigning to leave as meddling in British affairs. Most recently, the U.S. President implored young British people not to pull back from the world at a town hall meeting in London.
When I speak to young people, I implore them, and I implore you, to reject those calls to pull back. I'm here to ask you to reject the notion that we're gripped by forces that we can't control. And I want you to take a longer and more optimistic view of history and the part that you can play in it. Your capacity to shape this world is unmatched. What an incredible privilege that is. And you've never had better tools to make a difference, to forge a better UK and a better Europe and a better world. So my primary message today is going to be to reject pessimism and cynicism, know that progress is possible, that our problems can be solved. Now I'm on the other side, and main thing between the United States and Europe is trying to just break down some of the regulatory differences that make it difficult to do business back and forth. Plus making sure those light sockets are all matched up. I mean, those light sockets are really irritating.
Moving on to the U.S., 8 members of one family, including a teenager, were shot dead in rural Ohio just before gunmen killed 6 people in Georgia. In Ohio, 7 bodies were found at 3 houses close to each other, and an 8th was later found at a separate site. The victims were all adults except for a male juvenile who was 16 years old, and all members of a single family. 2 babies, one aged 4 days, the other 6 months, as well as a 3-year-old child reportedly survived the shootings. The authorities gave no possible motive and no arrests have been made. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon says governments of the world have made history after 175 states signed the Paris climate deal at the UN headquarters in New York City. Swiss pilot Bertrand Piccard, who is flying a solar plane from Hawaii to California, congratulated Ban on his landmark deal to slow climate change. Piccard is flying a Swiss-made Solar Impulse 2 using only energy from the sun. He plans to land near San Francisco later today.
Hello, Solar Pulse. Hello, Captain Piccard. Where are you now flying? Can you hear me? Oh, yeah.
Today, what clean technologies can achieve impossible things like flying day and night with no fuel on a solar airplane.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us on this historic day. You look like an asteroid in the moon. You look great. You look great.
You know, Mr. Secretary General, yes, what you are doing today in New York, signing the Paris Climate Agreement, is more than protecting the environment. It is the launch of the clean technology revolution. And this revolution is going to replace the old polluting devices, polluting and inefficient like combustion engines, incandescent light bulbs, badly insulated houses, old grids of distribution of electricity. All this is going to disappear. This is causing the CO2. This is causing the pollution. And today, what is fantastic is that we have profitable solutions. Not expensive problems, profitable solutions.
All the best to you. Bon voyage.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, and congratulations for what you are doing. The world will remember it. You are a pioneer also.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Speaking in New York, Prime Minister Tamam Salam appeals to the international community to help Lebanon deal with the burden of Syrian refugees plaguing the country. UN Special Envoy for Syria estimates that 400,000 people have been killed in Syria's civil war and urges major and regional powers to help salvage a crumbling ceasefire. And an Egyptian court adjourns a verdict in the trial of former President Mohamed Morsi until May 7th. Those were your Saturday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Melissa Newman. I wish you all a very nice weekend.
ترشيحي لرئاسة المجلس البلدي لمدينة بيروت.